Good evening, everybody. It is I, Nick, Pennsylvania. I am here, as I always am, with my very good friend, Brendan Bond. How you doing tonight, Bond?
I'm doing excellent, Nick. How you doing tonight, bud?
Pretty good. I'm going to say just a couple things real quick. One, if you tend to listen to us on YouTube, you are realizing that this is coming out a little later. We normally post these on Sunday, everywhere and anywhere. But if you are listening to this on Sunday, you should know that I am neck deep in polka music. I am this weekend at the National Button Accordion Festival, enjoying the hell out of myself and playing music with people I only get to see once a year and having a grand old time. And so I am not uploading videos to YouTube until I return. So we are on the eve of my departure for that. And more important, more direct to the topic of today. The topic of today, Bond has brought something. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's interesting. I don't know anything about it. And he started to say, and I said, stop. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Last time we did the Hairy Hands, great title. I don't want to know anything. And all he said was, well, there's a pretty good chance you're already aware of this thing, but if so, only in passing. And that is all I will allow myself to be prefaced with. So I'm going to hand things over to you. Bond, what has been on your mind this week?
Like you mentioned, last week we talked about the hairy hands of Dartmoor, and that was a story that came to me while looking up other stories, and I just saw the name and was like, geez, that has to go on the list. That's such a good name. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is another topic that I got while looking up another story a few months ago. So if you guys remember, a few months back, we talked about the two taverns in Philadelphia, right?
Yes, I'm vaguely remembering this.
Yeah,
It's
so
pretty old, and one was like almost totally rebuilt. Am I wrong
yeah,
in
after a
saying that?
fire and stuff. And
Okay.
so whenever I was researching that episode in Philadelphia about Philadelphia and everything, I came across a reference to I guess it's a house, but a house or a manor. And I want to see, does the name Grumblethorpe mean anything to you, Nick?
Well, gosh, I wish I could say it did, because you say Grumblethorpe, I think grumble cakes, and of course only liars and thieves eat grumble cakes, and those people go to prison.
Right.
But I will say, I feel like Thorpe is one of those names that comes about in Pennsylvania
Mm-hmm.
quite frequently. Of course, there's Jim Thorpe, named after
Mm-hmm.
the man that used to be Mock Chunk. Grumblethorpe, no, but really nailing. Like, what a great name.
Right. It's a fantastic name, Grumblethorpe. That's one that goes right on the list. I stop what I'm doing. I'm like, Grumblethorpe, question mark.
It
Um,
sounds like a Jim Henson sort of character that
it
you hear about
does.
in Labyrinth.
Yes, yeah. If you told me that Grumblethorpe in fact lives in a magical cave somewhere, and you have to answer some questions to get to him, I'd believe
David
you.
Bowie's going to be running around a leotard.
Right. So I'd be like, yeah, it's just all checks out. Um, so some of the other names associated with Grumblethorpe, I'm positive you're going to be familiar with. So when we talk about Grumblethorpe, what we're talking about is a house that is in Germantown, right outside, like northwest of Philadelphia. Now, Nick, you probably know the name John Wister. So John Wister built this house in 1744. So anyone who's familiar with Philadelphia history probably already knows more about this than I do as far as this family goes. But John Wister was a German immigrant who came over and was a very successful wine merchant. He had a few houses. I think he had six properties in Philadelphia, in Lancaster, and this was one of them. This house was built as kind of like their summer retreat home. It was it was stereotypically hot in Philadelphia in the summers. So him and his large family wanted a place to go that at this time was kind of out in the country. No one would call Germantown country now, but at the time it absolutely was. And this house was known to locals as the Big House, which now we kind of think about jails, you know. But this was called the Big House because it was a huge house. By modern standards, not that big, but at the time, it was a pretty big place.
Yeah, what you said 1750s again?
1744 is when it was
Okay,
built.
so yeah, I
This is
gotcha.
old. This is old. Yeah. So, like I said, he was this wine merchant, and the house was built, like I said, in 1744. And when looking up the construction of it and everything, there was a name that popped up that kind of got my attention. It was saying that a lot of the wood from this house was Wickahisson schist. So we know Wickahisson from Johannes Kelpius and the Wickahisson hermits and everything that we've talked about both with Tim Carlson and with Tim Renner. So we're in that same area of what used to be the countryside in Philadelphia, now is, kind of the edge of the suburbs. So John Wister had a huge family, and the family actually lived in this house for 6 generations. Like it's a long time. So,
Yeah,
uh,
that's pretty impressive.
right,
What would that be, like 120 years?
something like that. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
didn't.
granted, I want to say that, I usually balk at the concept of generations. I think
Mhm.
that's something that people,
Yeah,
um, I
it's
think it's something people
another way
use
to
as a
divide. Yeah, it's another way to be divisive. I feel
right.
like in a lot of
There's
ways.
that, but also there's what generations are. The concept of generations was proposed by Herodotus in
Hmm.
ancient Greece, and it was more like every 33 years, I think was how he rubbed it,
Hmm.
is that every 33 or so years, most all leadership changes over.
Hmm.
And that's how he roughly defined generation. So let's just go with 25 years, 6 generations.
Hmm.
That's
It's a
pretty
long time.
impressive. Sure
Yeah.
enough.
So, and the house survived all of that. A lot of houses from that time have either been burnt down or, just torn down for one reason or another. This one has survived and it's still there today. We're going to talk about the current state of the house. But a lot of people who are familiar with the Wister family probably know for a few other reasons too, besides just John Wister's local history. Nick, you probably read his one of his I believe his daughter at the time daughter, Sally Wister. She's the one who wrote a book. Was written when she was a teenager during the Revolutionary War. So I guess that was his granddaughter. But she's like a published author and everything. The one son, Owen Wister, wrote a book called The Virginian, which was super popular at the time.
Yes, I have heard
Yeah,
that title.
yeah. So like this is like these are those Wisters. They've done a lot. The one son, John Wister, was a renowned kind of botanist, local astronomer, chemist. The wisteria plant is actually named for this family. That's how prominent of a botanist he
Oh,
was.
now that is interesting.
Yeah, it's just this was one of those families you could probably do an entire show or series of shows just on this family. It seems like, and
Well, in Philadelphia, not the Bogart real quick, but
mhm,
Philadelphia was a pretty I mean, obviously, especially at that time in America, it was one of the capital cities culturally and
right,
just size-wise, but there a lot to be said for botany and floral stuff in Philadelphia because
right,
I know even a century later, I know the poinsettia was kind of introduced
hmm,
to Americans from Mexico at the Philadelphia Flower Show. And the
right.
Philadelphia Flower Show is still a
Big
major
deal.
concern. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still a big deal. One of the other fun facts about the plants, because this house does have like a big like has a number of gardens behind it. There is a ginkgo tree that is thought to be the oldest ginkgo tree in America that was brought over from England in John Wister's time. Like there's a super old tree, ginkgo tree in the backyard and everything too. That's think of how many ginkgo trees you see different places. You can go to Lowe's and get them. First one in America. Oldest where the oldest one in America is at this house, which is just I don't know. So there's a lot of cool stuff about this family. I didn't even get a chance to really get into like John Wister or Charles Wister as much as I wanted to, because I guess he had a lot of contributions to astronomy at the time and everything. Um, and I bet there's a whole story to a lot of that. But so, for kind of our purposes tonight, as you can imagine, a house that has been around that long and has had that many, generations of especially prominent families in the house, there's probably going to be some stories that go along with it. This house is no exception to that kind of general rule. So it seems like a lot of the proposed activity that you get in this house, because this house nowadays is a museum. They do they do tours and everything. A lot of history education. It seems like you can rent it out for like weddings and stuff like that. And the place looks gorgeous. Like I have a friend that lives out in Philadelphia. I have a few friends in Philadelphia, but one that I hopefully will go be visiting in the relatively near future. And like this place is on my list now. I really want to go there. It seems like a really cool place. But so a lot of the modern stories come from the volunteers and the folks who work there. But that is not the beginning of the kind of like ghosty activities in this house. Now, whenever you look at it, if you haven't looked it up yet, please do look up Grumblethorpe. There can't be that many. I was gonna say look up Grumblethorpe, Philadelphia, but there I can't imagine there's too many houses named Grumblethorpe. But it's a gorgeous property. But as we've talked about before, when you look at it, you're like, that place is haunted. Like, I don't know what's there, but there's something there.
Yeah, I've pulled up images of it right now. This is the first I'm being aware that I'm seeing it. But nice, it looks like sandstone or granite house, red shutters, red door. I'm looking at some interior shots here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really nice. It has a lot of like furniture from different periods and everything in it.
Looks like some nice gardens in the back with some, it looks like coneflower and lupines, possibly. I'm no florist, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Our friends that are will probably be more impressed or at least more knowledgeable about it than we are. But yeah, really pretty. But it looks haunted. But one of the things I like about this place is it seems that despite its like kind of like its long history and everything, a lot of the haunting elements seem to be like, I'd say not positive necessarily. Well, one of them actually is positive we're going to talk about, but it's not quite as negative or as scary as some of the other places that we've talked about where it's like, oh, this place is haunted and it's all just like bad stuff after more bad stuff. This one's a little bit different. Whenever we talk about the hauntings in this place, there's kind of like three major, I guess like buckets or whatever you'd kind of refer to for the phenomena. So the first, and what you'll see a lot of times, if you are Googling this, you're probably seeing something about the blood-stained floor in Grumblethorpe. So I'll kind of get into where that comes from and what it kind of leads to. So where this comes from is during the Revolutionary War, as happened a lot of places, the English took over this house as a, command center, barracks, and were operating out of it. The Wisters were not there at the time. They were able to go to one of their other homes to kind of like stay from getting captured or anything. But the person who was kind of running things there was a Colonel James Agnew of the British military. So right near there, like we said, this is just outside of Germantown. There was a battle in Germantown that lasted a few days. One of those days, while riding into battle earlier in the day ahead of his troops, this general was taken off guard and ran headlong into enemy continental troops at some 100 yards, and there was about 300 of them. As he turned his horse to escape, Agnew received a fatal shot in his back, but he was able to ride back to Grumblethorpe. And the soldiers, whenever he got back, weren't able to stop the bleeding, and he ended up bleeding out on the parlor floor of this house and dying. He died there, and he's kind of like a famous, he was a colonel, so pretty high up in the British military and everything. So as you can imagine, that is obviously a traumatic event. The blood, like I said, actually stained the wood and everything. Now people talk about how you can still see the blood stain, and that's from what I can tell, that's not actually the case. It looks like what happened is they actually sanded. They had to sand the blood away because
Right.
there was so much of it.
I'm looking at photos of it right now,
Okay,
and
yeah,
yeah, yeah, I have a hard time. I think that sanded down because here's the
it
deal.
is.
It's really
Yeah.
hard having had to do this with floors
Mm-hmm.
before, unless you're going to strip the entire floor down and
Mm-hmm.
reseal it, it's hard to kind of feather in. You
Right.
remember at our old house, we put new hardwood floor in.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. Yep.
We cut it all ourselves and did it.
Yeah.
It was quite the task. And we did half of the downstairs all at once,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to do the other half later. And just because of that, there was always this weird partition, this demarcation where
Mm-hmm.
it was just not quite the same.
Yeah, like you do it on different days. Like same, we had the same tools. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Same
just,
wood type, yeah.
yeah. But so again, people say you can see the blood stain. It's not a blood stain, it's sanded. And that's like what the historians are like, no, that's where they sanded. Like it's like that's been documented, you know. So it's not an actual blood stain on the wood. So that's a little bit of like misinformation. What I'm just clear up because that doesn't seem to be the case. But you can see where the guy did bleed out. Like that definitely happened, and it definitely happened there. That doesn't seem to be in dispute. What people say, there have been staff members that have reported this and volunteers that have reported it. I'm going to read just a quick thing from the education director, Dana Thompson. She recalled on one Friday evening, excuse me, on a Thursday evening, seeing a black shape low to the ground, spinning very quickly from the dining room and into the parlor. So this was something that was going from the dining room into the parlor where he died. And she said out loud, "I'm not in the mood for this." After which the shape disappeared. um, and this was also seen by her son who was there with her. So there was kind of like, two witnesses. Unbeknownst to director Dana Thompson at the time, there was historical accounts of seeing swirling black shapes in that room that show up in different people's diaries over the years. So that seems to be a consistent haunting in that spot.
Well, let me throw a
Mhm.
question your way,
Yeah.
because again, I mean, I think we've well established where I stand on these sort
Hmm.
of things. Having said that, a swirling black shape, these wraiths, let's
Hmm.
call it that, are not usually associated with intelligence, but there seems to be responding, at
Hmm.
least in the folklore, black masses, things like that. They don't shadows don't seem to be associated with anything other than just nothing intelligent.
Hmm. Right.
This one definitely responds. I like this
That's what
lady's
it
direct
seems like.
approach.
Yeah.
You gotta be firm, draw a
Yeah.
boundary.
Well, it's funny, you hear that a lot from like ghost hunters and mediums and people who try and help folks with hauntings. That seems to be a consistent bit of advice from people who have some experience is that if something is scaring you, the best thing you can do is like firmly tell it no or tell it to stop. Not saying that always works or works immediately, but that seems to be like, again, the consistent direction. So it is interesting that like she said that and it disappeared. Now, granted, like, is that correlation or causation? Really obviously hard to tell. If it's raining outside and if I go outside and yell at the clouds enough and then it eventually stops raining, does that mean that the clouds listen to me?
I actually once did that as a kid. I stood out
Well,
in the rain for a while, and I was convinced.
it doesn't hurt.
I was 6. All right, but yeah, so I definitely had that, and I remember telling my friends, I'm like, no, I made it because I went out there, and when I yelled at the sky long enough, it stopped. I pleaded with it, and then it was our friend
I love it.
Brandon, and he's
Yeah.
like, well, the weather Joe DiNardo said it was supposed to be on and off showers all day.
Sounds about
Wow. And
right.
now I look back and I'm like, oh, you were stupid. You were
Oh,
6. You're
you're
so
six.
dumb.
Yeah.
What an embarrassment.
What an embarrassment. But again, correlation, causation, it's hard to tell sometimes, but I mean, but I think that that's interesting that that's like the reaction she had, because it sounds like for a lot of these other stories that people have, especially the folks that work there, it's not that they're getting like scared out of their wits. It's more just like, uncomfortable sometimes, or it startles them.
Yeah,
But
I
again,
think that's all fine reaction to
yeah,
if you're really
very
seeing something like
reasonable.
that.
Yeah, very, very reasonable, measured reaction by director Dana Thompson. So she reacted probably calmer than I would have. I give her credit there. But again, you do hear sometimes these swirling black shapes. That is like, I mean, obviously you hear, usually when people talk about quote unquote shadow people, they usually are in the shape of people. It's usually some sort of a humanoid shape. The black mists and everything like this, I don't know, it almost sounds like jinn or something, like the flameless smoke, makes me wonder if
Yeah,
some of
I
some of
didn't.
that
I
stuff is
think you meant
created. Yeah.
DJIN and not GIN.
Yeah, I think it's still pronounced gin though, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
And what
Yeah.
is it? There's more of cheese and you spirit than or
Something like
something.
that. Yeah. Um, but that's kind of what it reminds me of. It seems like it has more of a it's more in that realm of things rather than, what we would call like a shadow person, or certainly not an apparition. But who knows? Maybe that's how apparitions form, as they start that way. Who knows what the mechanics are of this, obviously. But I think it's interesting that you have like an established thing where you have that mist showing up around where this James Agnew died, obviously in a traumatic way. One of the other things, and this is one where I think I'm curious to see your opinion on. I found it listed in a few places and this one did not quote any of the didn't say that there was precedent in like any of the historical diaries or journals or anything like that. But it's mentioned a lot of places that if you're there on the anniversary of his death, you can hear moaning, like I assume like death throes, which is like a spooky idea,
It's a
but
spooky idea, but it also sounds like, well,
practically,
yeah, that's a classic sort of vibe,
yeah.
the classic sort of story that gets shared. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't get points for originality. It does check that
Right.
box, like if something, your whole stone
Hmm.
tape thing, and of course the building
Right.
is made of a lot of stone, and
It is.
I don't know
Yeah.
what type of stone it is.
Yeah, like if and who knows, maybe that's just like an embellishment that some of these places were putting on it, like, oh, the anniversary of his death. But
But
if
here's real quick to
yeah.
that. Even if you buy the stone tape thing, which I've said before that
Hmm.
I guess I could entertain that. It's an
Hmm.
entertaining idea. Why would it adhere to a human calendar?
Right. Yeah.
The
Why
calendar
would
is something we constructed,
yeah,
and
it's
we've had various ones.
right.
And again, the 17. Wait, when did this happen?
Seven
1770s?
what would have been 1776, I imagine.
Oh,
77.
okay. So
Yeah.
I might be wrong. But I know like a lot of our early presidents were born under, I think it was the Augustine calendar and
Oh
not
yeah, it
Or the
was.
Julian
Yeah,
calendar.
Julian calendar. Yeah, it's
So
Julian calendar.
I'm
Yeah.
not certain offhand what calendar we were on, but does the spirit world focus Georgian calendar, Julian calendar?
Yeah, it's
What are
just
they
yeah,
operating
right. And
on?
that's like one of those like mechanical things that is just like if there is an actual mechanic to this, that is like a bridge too far, you know?
Exactly my
Now,
point.
if it is again, but that's also at the same time, if it is a co-creation thing, and if everyone kind of decides that, oh yeah, on the anniversary of this guy's death, that's when you hear this. Enough people think that over time, maybe it does happen. I would buy more that people just hear moaning sometimes. Like
Right.
just kind of like the regular stone tape theory.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I
so
I would be more in line with that because again,
mhm,
as you said, it's just a bridge too far because again, if these things are real,
mhm.
there are physics, there are mechanics to it. If it has predictive capabilities, it
Predictive. That's
is
a good way of putting it.
not going to adhere to a man-made calendar because that's just physics doesn't work like that.
Right.
And even our
Right.
calendar, we have to have leap years to account for the fact that our cycle around the sun isn't a
Hmm.
perfectly round number. What's more, it changes over time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The progression and everything. So like, yeah, like short term, sure. But when you're dealing with something from this long ago, like it, I don't, yeah, it breaks down after a while. And we're going to talk about dates here again in one of these other stories in the third one here. But so that's kind of it for James Agnew. That's again one of the more popular ones. I think that the bloodstained parlor floor is very kind of clickbaity, but there is some like real history around it. And I bet that if you're a educational director there, it's a great excuse to talk about the Battle of Germantown and get people excited.
Well,
You
and
know.
I'll say too that this is it's a good story
Hmm.
for story's sake. As you say, there is some historicity to it,
Hmm.
so that's cool, and it makes me think of another Thorpe, not terribly far away. Again, I already mentioned Jim Thorpe, and of course, if
Hmm.
many people know Jim Thorpe, it's either because of the man that the town was the name of the
Named
town was
after. Yeah.
changed. It was
Too.
changed from again Mock Chunk, I think it's how it was said before, to Jim Thorpe, and I guess there's been some debate with the ancestors, the descendants of Jim Thorpe
Hmm.
himself. Ah, bottom line is, if anybody knows anything about Jim Thorpe beyond all that I just spit out, it's of the prison cell, the jail cell in town, which
Hmm.
supposedly has a mysterious handprint that
Yes.
cannot be
Yep.
washed off, and I think it's just a feature of the stone or whatever, but it is interesting, and
No, it
it
is
makes me think of
interesting.
that. It
Yeah,
makes
no,
me
it
think of that.
yeah, no, that's another fun one to cover sometime. But yeah, no, that's a great association. I'm sure other people have brought that up too there at this place. But so some of the other two other kind of like main categories we have here for the some of the phenomena is attributed to. One is just to the servants and people who have worked there because they obviously had a large staff over the years, and who that is the kind of phenomena that that's attributed to is in the dining room there is a very large mirror, and it is said by patrons and people working there that a lot of times they see people in like old time what look like kind of like maid or servant uniforms walking in the background in the mirror, but they don't see them in the actual room
Yeah,
with
that's
them.
spooky.
It's spooky. Yeah, it's like
Very cinematic.
it's very cinematic, but like there is something I know we've said this before, but like there is something uncanny about mirrors that
Well, back in the day, people used to think so because, of course,
mm-hmm,
there are some people in places where when someone would pass away,
mm-hmm,
this was back
you
in the day when a
cover
lot of times viewings were held in the house. Yeah, they would cover
mm-hmm,
the
cover all the
mirrors.
mirrors. Yep.
And whether
Um
people really believed it or whether it was just a superstition we followed, like saying bless you has been ingrained in all of
right.
us.
Yeah.
People did do that.
Right. Yeah, it was just what you did. Like it was practical.
Right. I don't know how
Um
widespread that practice was, but it was
yeah.
a thing.
Right, right. But so mirrors are definitely uncanny and large mirrors. Like I feel like when you walk into a house, because you can see photos of it, I believe on one of the sites, the large mirror that is like historical in the dining room or one of the dining rooms. Like it's big. It's like a 6, 7 foot wide mirror. Like it's huge. I think a lot of times too, people aren't used to seeing mirrors like that big in rooms like that. And also if you're in a room that you're not familiar with, especially one that's like open to the public, there's just a higher likelihood of someone walking around in the room that you didn't know was there, you know?
Yeah.
Um, just, but not so much. And it doesn't seem like they do a lot of like period dress stuff here. It's not like this is like a living history type thing. It's kind of hard to tell the veracity of those stories, but those ones do pop up a lot, and I completely agree that that is spooky as hell.
Well,
So,
how many times have you been in like a restaurant and you had a
uh,
hard time telling whether that was a mirror or whether the place was bigger than you realized?
how so someplace I was just at today that we were just talking about. I don't mind shouting them out because the place is great. Cummings West.
Yeah.
Um, it's a coffee shop that has basically an entire wall of mirrors, and
And
I
it's in
think
order to make the place look bigger because
yeah,
Cummings West is a pretty small
small. Yeah,
place.
it's small.
Pie
I
Berry.
I've heard so many people say I didn't realize that was a mirror. when in like
Exactly my point.
being there the first time. I think like I know I said it to you the first time we went there. I remember our drummer saying it to me the first time me and him went there. My brother said it to me. Like it's just like so I think that there is something about mirrors, especially when you're not expecting them in certain places, that it just,
I
it
feel like traditionally steakhouses were really bad about that.
steakhouses love big mirrors.
Yeah, I think
That's
because
just
the golden age of the steakhouse was like the 70s, and that seems to be like the high watermark for wood paneling and
right,
mirrors, big
right.
mirrors.
Yeah, then we transitioned to just tchotchke on the wall.
Yeah,
I
like a
feel
Cracker
like,
Barrel.
yeah, it was like, how much stuff can we put on a wall?
You're
Can we put
right.
some more stuff? Now we're obviously
Heaven
into the
forbid these patrons not have enough to look at.
right, exactly. Heaven forbid they talk to their family. Sorry, I'll
Are
save
you
that.
not entertained?
Is your yeah. But okay, sorry for the digression there. But so people see these servants or people who work there walking around in the mirrors. And there's another one. So this is one from again someone who worked there a while back. So this is someone named Kelly Alsop. And she recalled a particularly unnerving experience in one of the upstairs rooms. Walking through the room with two other staff members during the middle of the day, Kelly noticed their shadows cast on the floor, but she also noticed a fourth shadow that didn't belong to anyone in the room, and the shadow was clearly wearing a long dress. Everyone else was in jeans.
Okay, I like that one too.
Oof.
It's kind of a similar
It
story, but with
is.
slightly
Yeah.
different variables.
Yeah, I like the idea that there's people that cared enough about this house that were working there that stick around, you
That
know,
or this is some sort of purgatory that they're
or a
stuck in.
purgatory. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, those that's
They're
very
indentured
that
for
is
some more
that is very
time.
telling of both of our outlooks on things. I'm like, oh, isn't it great how much they love being there? You're like, these people are stuck there. Both of which I think have plenty of validity.
But no,
But
I really like
yeah,
the idea of that sort of story. I mean, again,
it's subtle, like
this
just seeing a
has nothing
shadow
to
on the
do with
floor. Yeah,
right. This has nothing to do with whether one does or should believe
right.
whether this is real. Again, just as a storytelling thing, that's a really
Hmm.
captivating idea. Just like the mirror, there's a reason why it's so cinematic. We see that
Yeah,
all the time. Someone's shaving, someone's getting a glass of water in the middle of the night, and there's that
yeah.
jump scare in the mirror
Hmm.
behind them, and nothing's there.
Nothing's
I
there.
think the shadow thing again, it's very similar, just with slightly different elements, but I
Well,
think
and
that's
I
a good one.
it's a good one, and I like, and this is just purely again for aesthetic purposes. I like the idea of like subtle hauntings, where it's just like these little things are happening that you might notice or you might not notice, but they're happening regardless, just throughout the day.
Oh, I think
Um,
that's a great point.
yeah, and because again, we've talked about, especially with the stone tape stuff, if this stuff does have a mechanic to it that's just like running, whether we're paying attention to it or not, which again is
Yes.
up for debate, then in theory, like that should be happening all the time, like like whenever, you know.
And it
Um,
should be really boring stuff
right.
typically.
Yeah, these are people like doing yeah, which I think most people would agree, the majority of our day jobs, that's about as boring as it gets, you know.
Right.
So um it's I don't know, it's certainly cinematic, but doesn't feel as sensational as some of the other stuff. If they were just making
That's a
this,
fine way to parse that subject there. It
yeah.
yes, it is cinematic in that it would be a dramatic effect. It would play very well on screen, but at the
Hmm.
same time, it's not the dramatic jump scare. It's just
Right. It's
all of a
just
sudden you realize there's too many men on ice or something.
right, right. It wasn't like a ghost jumped out and scared Kelly and her two staff partners. You know, it was just like, nope, she just noticed it was there.
And I
Um,
appreciate its restraint.
right. Yeah, let's give this ghost a little bit of credit for being, not trying to bother people while they're working, you know. I respect that. Now, speaking of work, this third one is my favorite because I just think it's like I don't know. It's very heartwarming. So this one is a haunting that is commonly attributed to someone named Justina Hemberger, who was another German, and her family all died in the yellow fever epidemic.
Not very heartwarming so far.
Not very hard. Yeah, not great so far.
But again, a
Try,
common thing to have happened.
right. Yeah, looking up the history of this family, like you see yellow fever, scarlet fever, all this stuff popping up. Like they lived through all those different eras,
Right, and there was entire cities that would get shut
just
down
wiped.
periodically
Yeah.
because of these sort of things. So,
hmm Yeah.
right.
But so this Justina family died from yellow fever when she was very young, and John, the eldest Wister, took her in. She became like the what's the word they use for it a few places, like she basically was the house like manager. She basically like ran the house uh, for a long period of time and was kind of in charge of all the other folks that work there and everything. Two things happen with her that are interesting around her death and her haunting, supposed haunting. So this is one of those. She died, and when she died, it was on a Wednesday, and that night she was at one of the other houses. Or excuse me, Sally Wister and one of her other sisters was at one of the other houses, excuse me. Justina was at Grumblethorpe and died in the night from an illness, but showed up at this other house to Sally and one of the other sisters. And this is recorded in their diaries where Justina just walked through their room at night and they were like, what in the world? Like, she's not supposed to be here. She's at the other house, which is like 7 miles away or something like that. Then in the morning, they later found out that she had actually passed the night before. So this is kind of one of those nighttime visitors where someone dies and then shows up to loved ones, which again was kind of a classic ghost story.
Absolutely. It's not dissimilar from the experience I've shared here a few
hmm
times that I had
Yeah.
of someone just kind of being in the room, whether they're
Yeah.
passing through or just they're stopping for a moment, but they're gone.
Right. Right. And, sometimes that happens before people find out, other times it's after. And, but I mean, that just, we do see that happening often, probably more often than people report even. But now after that, people not only see her apparition walking around the grounds, but it's very specifically associated with the smell of baking bread. And the reason why people have kind of connected those two things is what she would do is she would actually stay up and bake bread every Friday night to give to the poor on Saturdays. That was apparently something that, as long as she was in charge of the house, she did like every Friday kind of things, and in the evenings. And they say now that like that's if you want to see a ghost at Grumblethorpe, the best thing you can do is be there just after sundown on a Friday, which again kind of has the date specific thing that we were just talking about how we don't necessarily like.
Yep.
But I think the idea of a ghost that is still trying to help people in its in death is just kind of like a beautiful thing, you know?
Sure.
And people say again that like when they see her spirit, it's never in like a scary way or anything. It's more just it kind of it seems like she's just going about her business. People smell this bread being made and everything. It seems like a lot of the staff speak about her and her spirit in a very reverential kind of way. So if you're going to see a ghost, Justina Hamburger is probably one of the ones you do want to run into, it sounds like. So those are kind of the three like main buckets. There is other activity that happens there, but a lot of it is just kind of, the just the usual, people seeing, indiscriminate, apparitions, sounds, people talking, things like that. It really, a lot of it falls into a lot of the, again, the stone tape type of residual hauntings
Yeah.
that we talk about a lot. But I do like the idea of like the smell of bread, because again, you're at this point, you're in suburban Philadelphia. The odds of someone baking bread at any given time on that block is probably decent,
Hmm.
like just to call spade a spade. But like that's just such like a nice story, and it's not often we find like heartwarming stuff on this show. So like when we do, I want to make sure I call out how much I like it. So those are kind of like again the kind of the big things. Now again, this is a place nowadays that like we've talked about gets attention for being haunted. Again, it is a educational facility. You can rent it out. People have parties and weddings and stuff there. So if there's a place that's going to get like both have the history and get like the attention that like could create a co-creative element to a haunting, or places that just have a lot of emotional energy. A lot of it seems to be good, but still a lot of emotional energy attached to it. Grumblethorpe seems to kind of tick all those boxes.
Well, one of the things I like about all these is that, again, as you mentioned opening up, it's an older home by any definition, any
Yeah.
North American definition,
Hmm.
it's an older home. And the same family having inhabited it for so long, it's nice that there's this history of stories, as you said, with the ghost walking through. This is documented. If that's accurate,
Hmm.
this is documented in these ladies' diaries. I think that's really interesting that the stories of the home of a family have stayed with the home even after the family's gone.
Right.
Because, I think about my grandparents' house and I think about, oh, they lived there from 1961 until 2022.
Hmm.
And in all that time, there's all the family lore, the family stories.
Right.
I had an uncle born and die in the entire time that they lived in this house,
Right.
and so a family will carry those stories for many years, but
Hmm.
now the public has kind of picked up the mantle because of the house itself, the historicity of the house,
Hmm.
the fact that these stories have been able to be maintained. I'm sure that some of these stories are not, authentic,
Hmm.
but they're still attributed. The
Right.
family is kept alive in a way because people have these stories of them.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that has to play into it, good or bad, one way or the other, you know. Um, I say good or bad, I mean like as far as for the veracity of the stories, but it definitely plays part of it. But yeah, so I just thought this was a great name for a house. Not enough people name their homes anymore. Kind of like I'm big on naming vehicles. I think people should name homes
Yes.
too. Like let's all collectively kind of bring that back. I think we would all be richer for it. Again, this is a place that has a lot of really cool history. It's tied to a lot of important times and elements and efforts in American history, especially. And it has the ghosts to go along with it, it seems. But I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about something in Philadelphia. But again, I just thought this was too good to not look into, and it's not often that I look into something and find this much stuff for it already for something I've never heard of before, you know. So
No,
that was
again,
definitely a fun
historic
element.
house. Yeah, and I was not that aware of it, even in passing. Although
Hmm.
the Wister family, obviously we have wisteria growing here and
Hmm.
everything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
very cool. But if you have stories, how will the people tell us these?
Yeah, if you have a story you'd like to share with us, or if you have a place you would like us to look up, or if you're just baking bread on a Friday night and you want to tell someone about it, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at the Ghost Furnace Podcast, or you can send us an email at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.